Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. It started with a quiet rumor, then a private statement. Now it's official, Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz have made an announcement that nobody saw coming. Nobody expected this. Not from Johnny, and definitely not from Penelope. 4 years, they've stayed close. They've worked together. They've defended each other. But this time, what they shared is bigger than any movie role. Today, we're going to tell you exactly what they said, why it matters, and the hidden details behind their long friendship. Details most people have never heard. From themaments that brought them together to the struggles that kept them connected to the news that's making headlines today. Stay with us till the end, because the truth behind this announcement might just change how you see both of them. Welcome to Story Spot, where real stories unfold one layer at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. They met more than 20 years ago, back when Johnny Depp was already a Hollywood legend. And Penelope Cruz was still making her way in an industry that didn't always make room for women like her. The year was 2001. The film was Blow, a gritty, intense movie about drug dealing, lies, and broken dreams. Johnny played George Young, a man trapped by his own choices. Penelope played his wild, emotional wife, Mirtha. It was a complicated story, but behind the scenes, something simple happened. A connection formed. Not romantic, not dramatic, just human. Two people from completely different backgrounds, one born in Owensboro, Kentucky, the other in Alcobendas, Spain, but both drawn to the same kind of work. Stories that meant something, characters with problems, films that made people feel uncomfortable and moved. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but it was the respect off screen that stuck. Crew members said Johnny was quiet but kind. Penelope was focused, serious, but warm. They understood each other in ways few people did. She once said in an interview that Johnny made her feel safe during that shoot. He never interrupted her work, never tried to take over. He watched, he listened, he gave space. That mattered to her. She wasn't yet the Oscar-winning actress we know today. And yet Johnny treated her like she'd been in the game for decades. And Johnny, at the time, he was already dealing with fame he never asked for. The kind that follows you, eats at you, and writes stories you never agreed to. Penelope saw that. She didn't feed into it. She offered privacy instead of gossip, presence instead of praise, and then silence. For years, they went their separate ways, different projects, different countries, different lives. But never far, because then came Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. 2011, a blockbuster, a wild ride, and a reunion. Penelope joined the franchise as Angelica, a smart, mysterious woman from Captain Jack Sparrow's past. But this time, things were different. Penelope was pregnant during filming. 5 months in, the schedule was tough. The weather was unpredictable. The costumes were heavy. Johnny stepped in again without being asked. He made sure she had everything she needed. Comfort, shade, support. Not because it looked good, but because that's who he was with her. He even went out of his way to make crew members aware of her condition. He helped change schedules, made adjustments, protected her quietly from the machine of Hollywood. Penelope never forgot that. In later interviews, she'd call him one of the kindest men she's ever worked with. And it wasn't just politeness, it was loyalty, something rare in their world. Because over the years, their bond never turned into tabloid drama. There were no scandals, no messy headlines, no whispers of romantic drama. What they had was different. It was steadier, built on years of shared work, mutual defense and silence when silence was needed. When Johnny's personal life exploded into controversy, courtrooms, cameras, opinions on every screen, Penelope did something not many people dared to do. She spoke up in 2020 during Johnny's legal battles. She submitted a written statement. It wasn't just a character witness statement. It was a window into 2 decades of friendship. She wrote, "I've always known Johnny Ace a kind, generous, and thoughtful man. He's never been anything but extraordinarily caring and respectful, not only to me, but to everyone around him." And that wasn't a PR move. It was personal, a risk. Because in Hollywood, speaking up can cost you. But for her, it wasn't even a question because their bond went deeper than headlines. It was rooted in what they'd seen of each other when no one was watching. And that's the part most people forget. We see red carpets, trailers, award shows, but we don't see what happens in the early mornings on set. We don't see the long conversations in trailers, the quiet meals after wrap, the ways people carry each other through hard days without needing credit. That's where their story lives. In 2022, rumors started to swirl again. People wondered if they were working together, a project, a film, maybe something more. But it stayed quiet until now. Because today, Johnny and Penelope aren't just making another movie. They're not appearing in another franchise or reboot. They're doing something they've never done before. Something that isn't scripted, isn't fictional, and isn't safe. But more on that in a moment. For now, all we need to know is this. They spent over 20 years showing up for each other on screen, off screen, in silence, and in storms. And while they've shared sets, interviews, and red carpets, what they just shared with the world is something they've never done together until now. It wasn't a grand stage. No velvet ropes, no fans lined up behind barriers, no screaming, no lights, no chaos. Just a simple invitation sent to few select names in the entertainment world. No press release, no publicist blast, just whispers. It read, "Private gathering, Los Angeles, Thursday, 4 p.m., confidential. Bring nothing but your attention." Even for Hollywood, that was rare. And when Johnny Depp's name was attached to it, people noticed. When Penelope Cruz's name appeared beside his, people didn't just notice. They stared. What were these two doing? Why now, and why together? They'd shared screens before, shared friendship, shared loyalty, but never this. Never something so quiet and yet so loud in meaning. At exactly 4:07 p.m. that Thursday afternoon, the doors to Amethyst ivy-covered building opened. Inside, nothing fancy. Just chairs, Atable, and two people who had stayed silent for a very long time. Johnny spoke first. He cleared his throat, looked down, and then smiled. Not the smile we're used to, not the mischievous grin of Captain Jack, not the mysterious charm of his indie characters, just Ammon-weathered, humbled, raw. He said, "We've both lived through things most people don't talk about. We've both been judged by headlines before anyone heard our voices, and we've both seen what silence can do, both good and bad." Then Penelope leaned in. Her voice was soft, but firm, steady, like someone who knew exactly what she came to say. The world sees actors as characters. We play parts, but we also carry pain that no script could ever write. And we've watched too many artists lose themselves because no one was listening. That's when they said it. The announcement no one expected. Together, they're launching something called the Still Light Foundation, a joint effort built quietly over the last 2 years. Tested, structured, prepared, and now ready. Its mission: to support actors, filmmakers, and artists recovering from the emotional damage of public trials, media attacks, personal loss, and mental health battles. Not a vanity project, not a trend, a lifeline. They didn't name names. They didn't have to. Everyone in that room already knew what they were talking about. Because in the past decade, the entertainment industry hasn't just made movies. It's made headlines. It's made memes out of breakdowns, clicks out of court cases, and opinions out of people's pain. Johnny knows that firsthand. So does Penelope. But this wasn't about revenge or clearing names or pointing fingers. This was about what happens after the public stops watching. When the cameras go dark, but the trauma stays. The Still Light Foundation will do 4 things. First, it will provide private mental health care for actors dealing with post-trial trauma, anxiety, or media burnout, real therapy, confidential, gnawed tape. Second, it will offer legal resource support for those facing lies about them, harassment, or smear campaigns, especially younger actors without the power to fight back. Third, it will create a storytelling grant, allowing survivors of public scandal or emotional collapse to write, film, or share their stories on their own terms. And fourth, it will build a community, both online and in person, where creators can come together without fear of being judged, watched, or destroyed. Penelope called it a place for artists to breathe. Johnny said, "I nearly lost myself once, not because of what happened in court, but because I forgot who I was outside of it." There was no applause, no clapping, only stillness. Because everyone in that room understood the weight of what was said. This wasn't about celebrity. This was about survival. And it wasn't just theory. They've already started. Penelope revealed that they've been quietly meeting with actors, writers, and even studio assistants who've gone through similar trauma. Some were publicly shamed. Others just quietly disappeared. One had a panic attack every time she walked into an audition. Another hadn't stepped on a set in 4 years. A young writer, once promising, stopped writing completely after his name was dragged through gossip columns. There's still light inside. You just need someone to remind you it's there. They've already secured private partnerships, donors who believe in the mission, therapists willing to volunteer, studios willing to listen, and perhaps most surprising of all, they've pledged to fund it personally for the first year. No fundraising gala, no red carpet campaign, just money from their own pockets because they believe in this. Not as stars, but as people who've lived it. Penelope shared something else. She said she once watched a friend spiral after a public breakup. A talented actress, funny, bold. But once the story hit the tabloids, her phone stopped ringing. Her agent dropped her. Directors pulled out. Suddenly, she was no longer an actress, just a scandal. She didn't recover. Penelope never forgot that, and neither did Johnny, because in his darkest days he said, "It wasn't the court that broke me. It was the silence afterwards. The feeling that no one saw the human anymore, just the headline. That's what still light is fighting. Not just the noise, but the emptiness it leaves behind." They ended the announcement with something quiet. No slogan, no campaign hashtags, just these words. This is not a performance. This is not a redemption arc. This is not about us. This is about everyone who didn't have the microphone, but felt every blow. And with that, they stood up, smiled, and walked out. No interviews, no follow-ups, no backstage access, just silence, but the kind that meant something. And maybe that was the most powerful part. Not what they said, but what they chose not to say. Because when two of Hollywood's most guarded, misunderstood figures come forward, not with a project, but with a purpose, the world tends to listen. Even when they say it in whispers. Timing matters. And when it comes to Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz, this timing says everything. For over 2 decades, they've known each other. Shared sets, shared stories. They've witnessed each other rise, fall, and quietly rise again. But until now, they never stepped into something this personal, something this exposed. Not as actors, but as humans. So the question echoes louder than ever. Why now? The answer, as it turns out, is layered, not dramatic, not manufactured, just real. It begins with Johnny. The world watched him, not on a movie screen, but on a live stream. A legal battle that wasn't just about truth or lies. It was about who gets to speak and who gets believed. The court case between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard wasn't just a court case. It became a cultural divide, a media circus, an online obsession. But behind the cameras, the hashtags, and the courtroom memes, there was a man who had spent 30 years crafting characters only to become a character himself in a story he didn't write and couldn't control. Day after day, his voice was picked apart. Every pause, every sigh, every blink analyzed. His past was dragged into the spotlight. His mistakes magnified, his silence mocked. For Johnny, the damage wasn't just to his reputation. It was emotional. He spoke in court about feeling abandoned, about losing roles before charges were ever proven, about watching people he trusted vanish when the noise got too loud. He described it as watching your name die in real time. And when the verdict finally came down, people thought the story was over. But for Johnny, that was only the beginning. Because what no one talks about is what happens after judgment, after the crowd moves on, after the courtroom empties out. That silence, it's deafening. He spent months away from Hollywood, from premieres, from interviews. He painted, he played music. He traveled to small towns in Europe where no one asked questions. But the pain never fully left. Because public betrayal leaves invisible bruises, and Johnny, for all his fame, had become deeply isolated. That's when he started writing again. Not scripts, not songs, but letters to friends, to old co-stars. And one of the first people he reached out to was Penelope. She replied almost immediately because she wasn't a stranger to judgment either. Not the courtroom kind, but the quiet cutting kind that comes with having an opinion, with caring too much too publicly. Penelope has always used her voice, not just in roles, but in the real world. She's spoken out against child trafficking. She's campaigned for refugee support. She's challenged the Spanish government on healthcare and women's rights. And with every speech, every stance came criticism. Some called her dramatic, others said she should stay in her lane. One newspaper even ran the headline, "Cruz tries to be a hero again." But she didn't stop because Penelope knows what silence can cost. She once told a journalist, "Every time I stayed quiet to protect my career, I lost a piece of myself." So when Johnny reached out to her, broken, skeptical, and unsure what to do next, she didn't offer advice, she offered space. They started meeting again. Not in studios, not on set, just as people. Sometimes at a private vineyard, other times in rented cabins away from the city. No agents, no contracts, no noise. They talked about fear, about being misrepresented, about the stories they could never tell publicly, about the others, actors, directors, assistants, who had gone through the same, but had no voice at all. They began to notice a pattern. The industry was full of people who had been crushed not by failure, but by silence. By being told, "Don't speak up. It'll ruin your name. Or worse, you're lucky to still be here. Don't push it. They knew these people, had worked with them, seen them smile at rap parties, and then disappear. No calls, no work, no explanation, and slowly the idea started to take shape. What if there was a way to catch them before they fell too far? Before they broke, not with charity, but with presence, structure, dignity. Penelope said it first. We know what it means to be judged. We know what it costs to stay silent. Johnny nodded. They weren't speaking as stars. They were speaking as survivors of systems that celebrate you until they don't. That's why this isn't just a project. It's their way of healing and helping others heal too. It's not about rebranding. It's not about comeback tours. It's about creating a space where the aftermath isn't ignored, where people can go when the lights turn off, when the story gets twisted, when no one returns their calls. They know how it feels. Penelope once described the guilt of watching someone fall apart and not knowing how to help. Johnny once admitted that at his lowest, he would stare at the ceiling for hours, asking himself if he'd ever be more than a tabloid headline again. Those moments, they don't leave you, they shape you. And for them, the decision to build something out of that pain didn't come from pressure. It came from stillness, from long walks, from handwritten notes, from a mutual understanding that time doesn't always heal everything. Sometimes you have to build something with your own hands to make meaning from the wreckage. So why now? Because enough time has passed for the dust to settle, but not enough for the pain to disappear. Because the industry is still losing people, not to failure, but to silence. And because these two artists, after decades of surviving it, finally found a reason to speak louder than the noise. Not with anger, but with purpose. And that purpose has just begun to take form. When the announcement finally made its way into the public eye, the internet didn't just react. It exploded. At first there was confusion. No red carpet, no trailer, no teaser campaign, just a quiet headline on a few trusted outlets. Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz launched joint foundations supporting artists in crisis. The first wave came from fans, and they weren't just supportive, they were emotional. One Twitter user wrote, "This isn't a publicity stunt, this is healing. This is two people who've been dragged through fire, choosing to build shelter for others." Another said, "We watch them suffer in silence." Now they're speaking not for themselves, but for everyone Hollywood chews up and spits out. On Reddit, a thread titled, "Still Light Foundation might be the most important thing Depp has ever done," quickly reached the top of the front page. It wasn't just film fans. Mental health supporters joined in. A licensed therapist posted on Instagram, "The trauma of public shame is real. What Depp and Cruz are doing isn't just brave, it's necessary." Still, not everyone saw it the same way. Within hours, critics weighed in. A columnist from a major entertainment blog wrote, "It's hard not to see this as carefully timed image management. Two aging stars looking to reset the narrative." Another outlet posted a headline that read, "Depp and Cruz team up. Redemption or PR move?" Some called it damage control disguised as charity. Others questioned the need for celebrity mental health efforts, asking, "Aren't these the richest, most privileged people alive?" But that argument didn't hold long because more voices started to speak. And this time they weren't anonymous. An actress who once co-starred with Penelope in a forgotten indie film posted, "She was the only one who noticed when I wasn't okay. She left a note in my trailer that said, 'You're not alone. That was 2013. I've never forgotten.'" A former assistant on a blockbuster, Johnny, once posted a short thread. "I had a breakdown on set once. Johnny sat with me for 40 minutes in a costume tent. Not because he had to, because he listened." This foundation,